So, good morning, everyone. I'm here representing the director of ICS, who is currently in the United States as deputy director. Despite I'm also part of the advisory board of ABIDE, so it's a double position. And I'm here to open this symposium, which is the first really big symposium of the ABIDE research project. This is the only big research project, ERC research project that we have currently in ICS, despite we already had others. And it is no doubt one of the most creative and innovative one that we have in this Institute of Social Sciences. We have here mostly 4 main disciplines, which some of them are entangled in this research project. We have sociology, we have anthropology, and political science and history. And then we have geography as a minor discipline, also part of the social sciences. We have a relationship to EGOT, which is a center, there he is, a center of geography. Well, this ERC research project, directed by Verónica Policarpo, brings animal studies to ICS. It actually started some years ago when Verónica had another research project on animal studies. It crosses 2 of our main thematic lines in ICS, one on inclusion and another one on sustainability. Because of the recovery of fires, the inclusion aspect of this research is really important, and the regeneration of life. And then the creative and very current important discussion on multispecies methodology and approaches will be and is being a very important contribution to the sustainability thematic line. We have mostly, till now, environmental studies more directed to public policies and to issues like energy and so other completely different kind of focused and animal studies that is being developed in this research. I would also like to emphasize the different regional geographic regions that the research of ABIDE is developing. ICS has a mission connected to the Lusophone world, despite the fact that we have along our history people working on other regions. We do consider that that is our most important contribution to social sciences in the world, and we have, of course, a very specific and important connection to Brazil. And so this ABIDE is giving us also contribution to this long-standing relationship between Portugal and Brazil, and in this very important thematic topic, which is also the recovering of fires, which is one of the most key problems that Portugal is facing in terms of the climate change result. I would also like to emphasize the importance of training that this ERC is bringing to ICS. We have a specific also role on training junior researchers on the level of the PhD. We have 4 different PhD programs in ICS. But also on the level of young researchers, postdocs. And so this is one of our main roles also as a research institute, to be able to combine different generations of researchers. So I think that this research has a very good equilibrium between the junior and senior researchers. Now we are in the face of the first big symposium, as I was saying. this is the results that have to do more with the kind of media narrative, as we can see through the program, but also the first time that the team is bringing us different results from different perspectives that the research is developing. So we are having now a first keynote by one of the members of the advisory board too. And then we will go on with kind of more discussion roundtables where the results of the research will be put together and discussed with the audience. Because of how I was explaining that ICS has usually a late schedule, so usually things start later, so I'm sure that in 1 hour from now we'll have more people here in the room, which is a pity, so that they will not listen to you, but we will be here, I do want to thank you for the opportunity to listen to your talk, and that's it.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Patricia Vieira. I am a researcher at the Center for Social Studies of the University of Coimbra, and I also head a research project on topics that are close to the topics of ABIDE. I work on the Amazon River Basin, and I examine how animals and plants are a big part of art, literature, and culture in the Amazon. And so because of this, I have collaborated closely with ABIDE, and so it's a real pleasure to be here in the first big symposium of the project. And it's even a greater pleasure to introduce David, who, as you know, is going to give our first talk this morning. And I've researched a bit about David, so most of you probably already know him. It's an honor to introduce him. He's a senior lecturer in the School of Health, Care and Social Welfare, Division of Sociology at the University of Mälardalen in Sweden. I hope I pronounced this correctly. His research focuses on the relations between humans and more than human beings, both concrete relations and also how these relations play out in social theory, philosophy, and so on. He also studies other issues, organizations, professional identities, business ethics, and so on. David has published numerous articles and book chapters on all of these topics, and today he will be talking to us about reading rabbits, narratives of pets, pests, and life partners, which I'm really looking forward to. So I want to welcome David to Lisbon, and the way this will go is he will have until, I think he'll have about an hour for his talk, and then we have time for discussion, Q&A, and I'm sure everyone will be excited to ask and share with David some of their thoughts on his work. So David, you have the floor.
First time, if it's okay? Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for that very friendly introduction. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here. It's such a privilege to follow the ABIDE project. I mean, it's a massive project, lots to do. And I can just come in and listen to all the fun stuff and interesting stuff. I don't have to take responsibility for the actual work being done. So it's a pure luxury. It's always fun to get updates on the project. So yeah. So I'm going to speak about rabbits, and I won't speak about rabbits in disasters. But I will speak about feral rabbits and pet rabbits and pets or rabbits as life partners. And so I will discuss the ambiguous status of rabbits to maybe provide some tools to think with during these days about animals who are viewed as replaceable and animals who are viewed as valuable, and all the statuses in between that. Let's see. Otherwise, I could just trying to change slides. Perfect. Thank you. So, just to mention some things I've done previously, as Patricia mentioned, I'm interested in both concrete relationships between humans and animals, what happens in actual encounters between humans and animals, but also how ideas of animality and humanity, and of the human and the animal, how these ideas emerge from these encounters and are sometimes also challenged, the distinction between the human and animals. I've studied pet owners, I've interviewed pet owners, among other things. I also wrote about pet cemeteries together with a Finnish scholar named Nora Schurman. I did a riding school ethnography where I followed riding school groups and hung out with them in the stable before, during, and after lessons to see what, I wanted to understand what they got out of riding and also what happened to the horses in the organization of the riding school. So what happens to the human-horse relationship within that organization. I've also looked at animal representations in animal rights propaganda and in mass media and popular culture, chihuahuas in popular culture, presidential pets, as an example. And right now I'm finishing a project on robotic dogs in dementia care, where I look at how these dogs and cats, robotic cats, generate animality and what that does to the care context, sort of. And I'm starting a project right now on animal pain and suffering, which doesn't sound very cheery, of course, but it's here I work with a historian and also Nora Schurman, who I mentioned, where we look at how conceptions of animal pain has changed in animal care handbooks from the 70s until today, how the idea of animals' capability of suffering has changed. So those are some of the examples. I have a hard time staying with one topic, but the overarching interest is in human-animal relationships. And today I'm going to talk partly about a project that I finished last year together with Erika von Essen, who was the PI of this project, License to Cull. And in this project, we were interested in municipal hunters and wildlife managers. So you might already know that, but there are, like in the night and very early in the morning, there are hunters in most bigger cities in Europe going around shooting animals who pose some kind of, animals who are considered to be a nuisance or animals that for some reason aren't viewed as aesthetically pleasing. So I was interested in how these hunters make decisions concerning which animals to shoot and which animals to spare. So the values, norms, and the theoretical and practical knowledge that these hunters rely on. And the interesting thing here is that there is no way of putting up like a definite threshold of the number of animals that a city should have. So there's no way of knowing like a sustainable number of animals. And there is no way of serving the exact number of animals living in a city. So we don't know how many animals there are in a given city, and we don't know exactly what the best number of animals should be. So that's why I'm interested in, or we were interested in, how then these hunters rely on their practical knowledge, their professional judgment, and just their sort of aesthetical sensibilities when they make these decisions. So we did interviews. Actually, we did more. I think we did around 40 interviews in the end, mainly with municipal hunters, but also with city clerks responsible for wildlife management and people engaged in wildlife rescue, a few of them too. And we also joined along. We went on 4 hunting trips also with hunters, and this is one of them, and this guy is trying to shoot 3 pigeons on a rooftop. I think he's actually showing off a bit because he's like hiding behind this wall for some reason, and like he's taking a really difficult shot when I'm watching. So this project then was funded by Formas, which is a Swedish research foundation focusing on nature and environmental issues. So I first got interested in studying this issue already in 2010, actually, when I was a PhD student. And At this time, there were several things happening in Sweden that caught my attention and made me think about our relationship to animals, wild animals and semi-wild animals and so on. And the first thing was a really horrible event, so a bit of a warning. But in Sweden, 4 men were jailed because they had tortured a rabbit to death. So they got a rabbit from a pet store, and then they tried to get their dog to attack the rabbit. And when the dog refused, they filmed the whole thing, and they taped the rabbit's legs and put it on fire. And the police was able to obtain the video and could then take the men to trial. And 3 of them went to jail for a few months, and 1 of them were fined. And in the video, the men are laughing, but 1 of them is also puking from disgust, probably. So it's like this horrible thing. A police officer that was interviewed said that it was the most horrible animal abuse case that this officer had ever taken on. And people were protesting in the courtroom against these men. So these were the most hated men in Sweden for a short while. But the thing is that, I mean, this of course is an extremely horrible case, but we also kill rabbits in Sweden on a regular basis. So thousands of rabbits are killed every year with rather gruesome methods, and I will return to that soon. So in the same year, there was a case with more than 1,000 rabbits killed in one intervention in Stockholm. So in Stockholm, there's a rabbit problem, or an alleged rabbit problem in several places. But one of these places is a green patch between 2 motorways. So there are no people there. There are no predators. There's no way to get to this patch because it's in between motorways. And so these rabbits can live there without being interrupted. And they dig tunnels under these motorways. And the problem is that the motorways then risk collapsing. So more than 1,000 rabbits were shot during the summer this year. And this also raised protests. So one notable journalist, he wrote an article saying that I'd rather have rabbits than boring plants in Stockholm. And he says that, he writes in this article, he connects the mass killing of rabbits to this horrible torture case, and says that what is it about rabbits that evokes bloodlust and barbaric territorial thinking, even in otherwise sane people? And this is not an animal rights activist. He's just a journalist, but he's very angry about this. And other people joined and protested. So this guy wrote an article saying that we should give contraceptive pills to rabbits instead of killing them. Poor Stampe. Stampe is the rabbit from Bambi, the Disney movie. There were also news around this time, 2009 to 2010, both in the US and the UK. The Swedish killing of rabbits got attention because apparently we burn dead rabbits in Sweden to heat homes. So this was framed as a very barbaric thing. The British and the Americans wrote articles about this, how violent we are doing this. And I mean, it's sort of a fair critique, so I think they were onto something here. And these cases pop up every now and then. So a few years ago, when we started the project, we had a case in Västerås, where I have my office, where a hunter who was supposed to shoot rabbits in a private neighborhood, he got so many protests, so in the end, he just pulled out from the mission and didn't want to do it. So there's something about rabbits. We could kill them en masse, but they also evoke a lot of emotions, very strong emotions. So in the project, we're using the notion of biopolitics, which you might already be aware of, and I know that some of you also worked with this concept. And biopolitics, or biopower, is the concept coined by Michel Foucault, and he says that it is the power to make live and let die. So he observes a shift during modernity towards a softer kind of power. So kingdoms before modernity, they relied on violence to ensure the security of its borders and its population. So they guarded the borders with armies, and they used violence against dissidents and sinners and other kinds of people, creating problems. But with Enlightenment ideals and with modernization, with democratization, it didn't work very well to just kill people who were uncomfortable. So A softer kind of power emerged where people were sort of disciplined into wanting to contribute to society. So power, instead of being focused on taking life and punishing people, power instead was moved to focus on giving people life, maximizing the quality of life of its citizens, and also disciplining them into doing things in a certain way and certain order. So biopolitics contains of two, or has two sides. Disciplinary power, which you can see in schools, where kids are from an early age taught to do things in a certain order, to show up on time and do certain tasks in a certain way. So in that way, kids are made into docile citizens very early on, and are taught that this is the best way of doing things. So they want to do that, and also they are taught to want to do it. And then we also have like a normative power, where and that is like all the norms concerning how to live well, how to stay healthy, how to take care of your family. The very idea that you should live in family units is a sort of biopolitical norm that is distributed to ensure that we become orderly citizens and that we contribute to the good of society. So with a healthy population, a large population, a population that brings new kids to life, it ensures a strong workforce and prosperity for the nation state, basically. But of course, this comes with lots of problems when these norms are quenching or filled with prejudice and so on and so forth. And the dark side of biopolitics is thanatopolitics, because of course modern states are guilty of the most horrible wars that known to mankind. First World War, Second World War, and so on. The war in Palestine and Ukraine and so on. So even a biopolitical state can use violence to ensure its borders still. So there's a paradox to biopolitics, a fundamental paradox. So to be able to use life as a resource, as something that you can use in the interest of the state, a modern state has to imbue life with an inherent value. So people must be viewed as irreplaceable. Each life must be approached as unique and meaningful in order for the state to use that life. So the promises from the state is that, okay, so we won't kill you as long as you contribute to society, basically. And then a lot of scholars have used biopolitics to discuss human-animal relationships and the way we manage animal life. And I think there is an interesting point here, because animals are, we use, when it comes to pets, for example, we control them in many ways. We give them medicine, we take care of them, and we also control their reproduction. So we use biopolitical strategies in relation to cats and dogs, for example. But on the other hand, we have the ultimate power over the lives of other animals. So animals are not essentially regularly seen as inherently valuable. So most animals are disposable for humans. So in that way, biopolitics is also limited when it comes to, as a concept, when it comes to understanding human-animal relationships. So just as a background, and I will return to the notion of biopolitics in this lecture, and I will talk about biopolitics and rabbits in relation to the hunters that I mentioned, but also rabbit activists, and I will finish by talking about the tennis hall breaking down in Sweden, which sounds a bit weird, but it will make sense, hopefully, in the end. So first, the hunters who kill rabbits. They argue that rabbits are an environmental threat and therefore needs to be killed. I mentioned the motorway breaking down. Another argument for killing rabbits is that they dig tunnels under buildings, which threaten buildings to collapse. During our fieldwork, we never heard of a building actually collapsing because of rabbit tunnels, but apparently it's a problem. And rabbits are also killed because they spread diseases, a bit like rats in that sense, and they can also destroy valuable crops and plants in botanical gardens, for example. But rabbits are also can also be seen as promoters of biodiversity. So one wildlife manager I talked to, he explained that rabbits, when they dig tunnels, other animals also use these tunnels. So in areas with lots of rabbits, the biodiversity is often greater. But the problem is that rabbits move around too much, he says in the interview. So there's no way for us to keep the rabbits in the places where they should be, of course, because they are wild animals. So depending on how rabbits move around, their status changes. If they are in the wild, in like outside cities, they are the purview of the country administrative boards, and they decide whether rabbits should be shot or not. And then there are rabbits on state land and in cities, and then it's up to the municipality to make the choice for whether to kill the rabbits. And rabbits are sometimes also found on private land, and then it's private landowners who decide what to do about the rabbits. So by moving across these boundaries, the rabbits can change status. Sometimes, so they can move from being killable on municipal land, where municipal hunters shoot them, and then they can run into private land where maybe there's a rabbit-friendly landowner deciding to spare their lives, which makes the job of municipal hunters very difficult. So how do they kill rabbits then? One way of killing rabbits is shooting them. I talked to a hunter in a mid-sized Swedish city who said that, well, the cool thing with being a municipal hunter is that you can drive around in a car and shoot from the car window, and that is, of course, nothing that you would ever be allowed doing as a normal hunter. So two of the hunters in that city, they sort of saw it as a sport, going around in a car, like, shooting rabbits on the go, and they kept track of how many rabbits they shot and made it into a sport. But he said they also had a case where a hunter had to quit because he liked it too much. He put up photos on social media of dead rabbits and stuff like that. So he became a problem. He had to go because it's not anything that they want to advertise for the public. But the problem with shooting rabbits is that rabbits, when you shoot one rabbit, the others just run away. They get scared. They're easily scared. So actually, and this is, again, I mean, don't listen if you don't want to hear this, but the normal method of killing rabbits in Stockholm is that they are clubbed to death. So when they do this, a few hunters go out together, and some of them a few of them hold up a net, and the others chase rabbits into the net, and then they close the net and they start clubbing the rabbits until they are dead. And he says, this hunter explaining this method, he said that clubbing a rabbit to death is very efficient and it dies right away, but it sure does look bad. So the argument is that shooting rabbits is worse because some rabbits might die from stress and when they are hunted, and it's like a prolonged death. You might also miss and shoot a rabbit in the leg or something, so it dies a slow death. And in this way, rabbits die very quickly. But it's not anything that they would do when people see, so they do this in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. And this hunter had only been caught once doing this, and he was scolded by a woman who happened to pass by. But otherwise, he has avoided critique. So this shows that rabbits are, they are definitely disposable of in the eyes of the hunters. They are killed in very gruesome ways, but in large numbers. One reason also that rabbits are killed is that they can get myxomatosis, which is a horrible virus that creates swellings around the eyes and in the throat of the rabbits. So rabbits die either because they go blind and they are caught by predators, or from starvation, or because they can't breathe because of the swellings. And this disease was introduced in Europe around 1950 as a way of keeping down the rabbit population. But it spread too much, and now rabbits are killed to protect them from the disease we introduced to kill them originally. So it's like paradoxical and very, very, very dark fact. So this is also, so in this case, and there are other examples also of animals being controlled by the use of diseases, which can be seen as a thanatopolitical strategy to keep the rabbit population down. So when it comes to the hunters, they talk sometimes about rabbits in a positive meaning as promoters of biodiversity. And some of the hunters I talked to also emphasize that rabbits, I mean, there's nothing wrong with rabbits per se. Rabbits also have a right to exist on this earth, just not under motorways or in botanical gardens. But still, rabbits are never addressed as biopolitical subjects in this way. They are not seen as inherently valuable. Killing one rabbit is not a problem for these hunters. But I also talked to people trying to save rabbits, and one of these organizations were Tiny Furries United, which is a pseudonym. I talked to the CEO of this organization, the leader, and she says that in this organization she gets to see the dark side of pet capitalism. So she says that, well, this organization, they save hamsters and rats and guinea pigs, but mostly rabbits that people don't want anymore. So they take care of abandoned animals. And she says that because, I mean, for us humans to have access to animals, to be able to just go into any pet shop buying a rabbit on a whim, there has to be, I mean, a constant production of animals. So there will always be a surplus, an excess of unwanted animals. And it's up to organizations then as the Tiny Furries United to take care of them. She also explains that, like, basically all rabbits in Sweden or literally all the rabbits in Sweden are, there's no, like, wild rabbit population originally. All rabbits are ancestors of either rabbits who are let out of fur farms or rabbits that are let out by their owners, like families who get a rabbit for their kids maybe, but rabbits can live for 10 years, and when you're a teenager, a rabbit is not that cool anymore, so the family gets rid of the rabbit, and it's either let out into nature or given away to an organization like this. And when rabbits live in the wild for a while, they tend to get the same color when they mate. They all get like this grayish brown color after a while. So these rabbits that she takes care of, they often suffer from abscesses, infections, bad teeth, malnutrition, wounds. Sometimes they are found. Sometimes they are given directly to the organization by families or people who want to get rid of them. But they are also found outdoors. On several occasions, she has gotten rabbits that were found outdoors, still locked in their cages, so they would have starved to death if no one found them. And at one point, she also found a rabbit cub in a glass container for recycled glass. But the rabbits had injuries, but a veterinarian could fix the rabbit, and it was okay then. And interestingly, a while into the conversation, she also says that we do not only take care of tame rabbits, we also sometimes capture wild rabbits to save them from hunters, and we often then focus on the cubs to avoid, because they are the ones usually killed by the hunters. So they capture rabbits, and she says that these rabbits are, I mean, all rabbits are in theory tameable because there's no big difference, there's no genetic difference between the wild rabbits in Sweden and the rabbits you can buy in a pet store. So although not all rabbits like being petted, all of them, I mean, have the same sort of capacity of becoming domestic or tame. And Dina Schwarwell has written, interestingly, on petting as a disciplinary strategy. So when we pet animals, when we make them used to human handling from an early age, we discipline them. We sort of teach them to like being petted. It's not a natural thing for a rabbit to be petted by a human being, but it's something it's an acquired taste. It has to get used to being petted. So in that way, it's sort of a biopolitical strategy to bring rabbits into a human social context, petting them. I also had to ask how they caught these rabbits. And the CEO of the organization, she explained that it's difficult to trap rabbits because they are very suspicious of traps or anything that sort of sticks out in the environment. Rabbits also, they love grass, obviously. So if they have grass around, they will eat the grass. They won't care about the goodies that you put in a rabbit trap. so in that way, it's difficult to catch rabbits. But so the thing is that they use the same method as the hunters. They go out, like maybe 8 or 10 people, and they go out with a big net, and they chase rabbits into the net, and then they close the net, but they put the rabbits in cages instead of clubbing them to death. This organization, they attempt to turn rabbits into a biopolitical issue. So instead of viewing rabbits as this sort of anonymous mass of life that you can manage, like rabbits as almost as a mass noun that you can manage as a municipal hunter, you can decrease or increase the rabbit population, and you can manage it in different ways. They try to bring out individual lives instead, to regard rabbits as individuals, and they also try to regard each rabbit as having sort of the right to live, although they also recognize that the largest number of rabbits will never be able to be saved, so to speak. And this is one of the rabbits that she tamed. She kept this rabbit for herself, but it's still very shy, so she said that she sent me this photo and said this is the best picture I could get of my rabbit, because she's always like running around and hiding, but she can tell from webcam footage that this rabbit is thriving because it likes to be around the other rabbits in the apartment and so on. So it's, it seems to be okay. So is there a way then, once you caught your rabbit, is there a way to live equally with rabbits? I don't think I can give a straight answer to that, but Julianne Smith tried to answer that question. So Julianne Smith she's originally a literary scholar. I think she's like a Shakespeare expert, an American scholar, but she also wrote 2 papers on rabbits, one about living with rabbits and one about rabbits dying. And the dying paper is on, in that paper she challenges the idea that death is meaningless to animals, that animals can't conceive of their own death. So she observed instances where rabbits passed away and how the other rabbits reacted to that. But anyway, she's a member of the House Rabbit Society, and it's an American organization that works a bit like Tiny Furries United. They take care of abandoned rabbits. And actually, Margot DeMello, who was here a few years ago to give a lecture, she's also a member of this organization. Julianne Smith joined this organization and started taking in rabbits, and pretty soon she had dozens of rabbits at home. And in these 2 papers, she writes about what it means to live with rabbits. And the idea in this organization is that it should be up to the humans to change their behaviors, not the rabbits. So if you force a rabbit to live in your home, it's not the rabbit's choice, it's your choice, then it's up to you to change your behavior to fit the rabbit's needs. So, and in this organization, then they exchange knowledge on how to do this in the best possible manner. And to do this, they engage in an active suspension of interpretation. So the idea is that they, instead of like trying to project your own human fantasies on the animal, you try to understand the animal on its own terms. So one thing, for example, is that we as humans, we tend to think of ourselves as individuals, as unique individuals with unique capacities. But rabbits often tend to think of themselves in relation to their flock or their group. So rabbits probably don't have the same sense of individuality that we do, or maybe like another sense of individuality different from ours, because they thrive best in very close proximity to other rabbits when they have other rabbits around them very closely. So rabbits are sort of part of a communal rabbit body, as she suggests. So in this, when designing a human rabbit home then, the idea is that you need to give up on trying to create a natural environment for the rabbits. And this is also an idea that is shared in this organization, the House Rabbit Society. So it's impossible to fake the outdoors to create the replica of the outdoors indoors. Once you bring rabbits in, you've already given up on trying to create a natural environment. So instead, they're trying to sort of create an unnatural setting, but they see the unnatural as a new kind of naturalness. And in practice, this means that observing the rabbits to see how they move in your house. So, for example, early on, Julianne Smith, she noticed that the rabbits like to run along the walls. So she pulled all the furniture from the walls so the rabbits would have a leeway around her house. She put out litter boxes where the rabbits pooped, so they chose where those should be. And she also put in a lot of things to climb on and chew on in her apartment. So basically her whole house was a big rabbit cage. And she writes that some people in this society, they build a cage around their own beds. So the only cage they have in their house is their bed cage that they need to be able to sleep at night. Yeah, the sound, is it okay? Yeah, okay. But she didn't feel the need to do that, but some of them do in this organization. She was able to sleep at night even with her rabbits around. But she built cages around the bookshelves to be able to keep her Shakespeare volumes without them being chewed on. At some point, also, she says in an interview that her husband gave her an ultimatum. So it was either him or the rabbits. And she said in an interview that it was a very easy choice. Of course, the husband had to go, and she continued to live with her rabbits. So that's sort of how she attempted to create a rabbit space, or make her home into a rabbit home. She also, one thing she does is that she neuters the rabbits or space them, because she argues that the rabbits will, if they can just procreate as much as they want to, they will soon become too many, and they will get different kinds of diseases, and the house will be overcrowded. So she says that's in their interest, but she doesn't feel good about it. And one thing that she does that's also a bit controversial is that she allows the rabbits to live on, even if they're suffering from chronic pain. So she argues that animals are, for animals, pain is something natural. All animals suffer from pain at some point in their lives, and it's just a human projection, the idea that animals should never have to suffer from pain. Here in her home, one could say that she creates a biopolitical sphere where each rabbit is considered valuable. So she brings the rabbits into her home, and each rabbit gains a sort of inherent value. And she also uses different kinds of biopolitical strategies, like the neutering and spaying, the controlling of their procreation, the medical interventions. She gives them medical treatment. She puts in different kinds of she does her best to create to give the rabbits a meaningful life with the things she puts in for them in her house. So in that way, you could say that she's like a biopolitical politician trying to create a thriving rabbit and balanced rabbit population in her home. And the interesting thing is that even if she takes extreme measures to try to live equally with rabbits, although she says that that's never possible, there's still no way of getting rid of this sort of biopolitical power arrangement. There's no way of living completely equal with rabbits, because you always have to control their lives somehow. It's always the human who has the ultimate power over their lives and deaths. And that's why you could speak about biopolitics within this very specific sphere of her home, I think. So this is the final thing I'll be talking about, the rabbit collapse. And that's an event in Nyköping that also happened in 2010. A lot of things happened in Sweden in 2010, at least when it comes to rabbits. So in the winter, in February of 2010, there was a big rabbit exhibition taking place in Nyköping in Sweden with purebred, well-groomed rabbits, the most expensive rabbits in Sweden, maybe the most cared for too. And during the night before the exhibition, the rabbits were left, or most of the rabbits were left in this big exhibition hall, in their cages or other confinements. But during the night, there was a heavy snowfall, and the roof of the building collapsed, and many of the rabbits escaped. Probably some of them also died. I don't have any information on that, but some of them escaped into the wild. And hunters around this time they said, well, I talked to hunters who were active also as municipal hunters at this time, and they said that after this collapse, it was impossible to shoot rabbits because you didn't know if you were shooting a wild rabbit who was considered a pest or someone's beloved, very expensive, purebred pedigree rabbit. So that's why they had to sort of lower their guns for a while. And after a while, some of them also spotted differences in the feral rabbit population. So the feral rabbits changed color because probably because of these rabbits escaping from their owners. So Georgia Gambon, who is heavily influenced by Foucault, he has talked about the political realm collapsing into the realm of bare life. And he argues that today, biopolitics has gone so far that humans in Western democracies tend to be approached as mere instruments for power. So the sort of humanistic side of biopolitics has diminished. So today, we're more and more being treated as resources by state power. But here we see a collapse of another kind. So instead of the collapse of the political realm into the realm of bare life, when this tennis hall collapsed and the rabbits ran away, suddenly the value or the idea of the feral rabbits changed. Suddenly they became visible as individuals. Suddenly when the municipal hunters pointed their gun at the rabbits outdoors, it was impossible for them to think of this rabbit as sort of just a disposable life because they didn't know of its origin. So in this way, by running away, the rabbits defied thanatopolitical categorizations. They were no longer, it wasn't possible to categorize them as either killable or sparable when these two populations mixed up. And here maybe we can talk about the subversive biopolitics with a nod to Hart and Negri and Esposito. They both, or all three of them, talk about biopolitics as having a subversive possibility. So in all states, in biopolitical states, there is always a fear among the elite that the mass of life will turn on them. So when enough people are, for example, brought to a square, they become a threat just from the mass of being there. So in that way, one could talk about these rabbits escaping as a sort of subversive biopolitics, where this mass of rabbits suddenly becomes something else by their mere existence. James Stanescu has also written beautifully about biopolitics and human-animal relationships, and he says that biopolitics is also potentially subversive because when we are treated as instruments, or when we're treated as mere, like pure life, a resource for governing, we're also reminded of our own mammal foundation. When we're treated as approached instrumentally, we are, as human beings, we are treated as animal-like beings. And that is also a possibility for ourselves to remind ourselves that non-human animals are also treated in this same way regularly. And I think also that is also what happened in the first case with the rabbit torture. It's impossible to read about that case without feeling horrible. It's impossible to reading about this rabbit being burned to death without imagining what it will be to be that rabbit. And I think that case is a reminder of our shared condition of precariousness, and also hopefully by placing these different events beside each other. Rabbit torture, the mass killing of animals and the clubbing of rabbits in Swedish parks, and even the homes of the Tiny Furs United and Julianne Smith, they can work as a reminder together of this shared condition of precariousness that we're all sort of subjects to by a political power in that sense. And this is the very final slide I just wanted to show you. So the City Museum of Nyköping, they tried to make this event of the rabbit collapse into a sort of historical event for the city. And they actually succeeded, I think, because people still talk about this event with a tennis hall in Nyköping. So they advertised a couple of years after the event, they advertised a contest where artists were invited to interpret the rabbit collapse. And this is one of the artworks that got a prize. It's Maud Jonsson who did this handicraft. And she writes that this is a picture of the result when rabbits mated with big rats by the river. So it's a rabbit rat. So thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, David. It was really a fascinating talk. I have lots of questions and curiosities. I am going to start off with a few questions, and then I'll open the floor for everyone to share their thoughts and comments and questions with David. And so as I said, I'll open with a first round of questions. Some of them are come out of the fact that I'm not an animal studies scholar, so some of these are really things that got me curious about rabbits when I heard you speak. And so I'll just go through a few of them. One of the things that struck me as you were discussing rabbits is how these animals, they assume different positionalities, which then leads to different ontological views of the animal and also to different ethics on the animal. The animal can be a wild animal, a pest, a pet, and then this translates into different behaviors towards the animal. And so one of my questions is, how do we end up defining these animals? Because this will then have repercussions on how we behave towards them. Do we have to choose between one of these? Because it seems that there are conflicting views of the animal, and then this leads to conflicting views on how to behave towards them. And so is there a way to reach a consensus on what the status of the animal actually is? And then this moves on to my second question. I was really struck by your description of Julianne Smith's behavior towards her rabbits. And then it got me thinking about the very issue of pets, right? It's I'm sure something that comes through a lot in literature. Should we even keep rabbits as pets? Are these animals suited to be pets? And then that then takes me again to the third question: what would be the rabbit's view on being a pet? Because that's something that we should also think. What is the animal's perspective on this? Does the animal enjoy being kept as a pet? What does the animal need? Are we even thinking about that at all? Because it seems that a lot is about how humans view animals as this or that, but what if we change perspective and put ourselves in the shoes of a rabbit or of a rabbit group? What would they want and need, right? So this is something. Do they enjoy living with Julianne, or would they rather live in the wild, right? This is something that we should ask ourselves, not just about rabbits, of course, but about all of our pets. And then this idea that we should put ourselves in the animal's shoes also led me to think about the pitfalls of choosing just one animal or one animal species separate from its ecosystem as a heuristic category, as a category that we choose for analysis. Because, of course, animals probably do not perceive themselves like that. They see themselves in a network, and in fact, many human communities also do not perceive themselves like that. They perceive themselves, I mean, if we think about Western categories, many humans see themselves in connection to other beings that are part of their environment, and so they do not see themselves as separate. And this would probably be true of rabbits as well. They probably see themselves as a part of a group, a system, a network that includes other animals, plants, and so on. And so I was wondering if by choosing just one animal, we're not reproducing the dangers of anthropocentrism, where we focus just on the human and projecting them onto other species. Rabbitocentrism, for instance, in this case, right? So just focusing on that one animal. And then one final comment, question, curiosity is about the use of these categories by thinkers like Foucault. I saw Foucault, Agamben, Michael Hart and Antonio Negri on multitude, Agamben on bare life, Foucault on biopolitics, and Roberto Esposito as well, who comes off of Foucault and Agamben. How these categories that are have become standard for thinking about, especially left-wing politics, the multitude, humans reduced to bare life, and so on. How these categories change if we are talking about more than human beings, because that seemed to me to be really interesting to just consider some of these notions that have become so well known in the realm of political theory and of radical political theory, and think about them or try to extend them to more than human life. What would be the consequences of doing this theoretically, politically, not only to think about the animals, but also coming back to humans? And I think you mentioned the multitude. I was thinking about those films of the zombies that are often interpreted through these categories of biopolitics, bare life, the multitude, how the zombies attack the rich, basically. And the zombies are often animalized because the zombies are basically the poor in these films, usually. And so if we extend these categories to animals, to plants, and so on, would there be a possible alliance between the poor of the world and these other beings, animals, plants, and so on, that are being oppressed pretty much in the same way as the poor, especially in the global south, which were the inspiration of people like Michael Hart, Antonio Negri, and so on, when they developed their theories of their theory of multitude, for instance. And so these were just some start-offs, and then we'll open the floor for other questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, do you want me to?
Maybe you can. I think it might be better if you answer a bit some of these questions now, and then we can go back and forth.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, it was a really rich. I mean, I'm really happy you got this much out of the lecture, actually. So I don't know where to start. But I mean, you began by asking, so what do we do about the rabbits then, or what would, like, should we settle for one of these ways of approaching rabbits, or and I think that's, I mean, luckily that's I at least I pretend to think that that's not my job, trying to come up with a final answer as a sociologist. Instead, like, I think just by showing these shifts between different paradigms of approaching rabbits, I wanted to make it more difficult just to settle with one of the choices, because even the Tiny Furs United, they need to it's on, yeah. Even the Tiny Furs United, they also have, I mean, the CEO at some point said that, okay, so at some level I can understand the hunters, because, for example, in myxomatosis, this virus, it's a big problem, and for the rabbits, I mean, as a rabbit, a quick death is probably better than dying after several days of suffering from this virus. So even she couldn't really distance herself from the hunters completely. So although she considered these hunters to be sort of her enemies, that she was sort of trying to trick by catching rabbits before they were shot, she also sort of sympathized with some of what they were doing. So I think the biggest problem is that if we make rabbits killable just on the basis of that category, if we make it too easy for us, then it's and just killing rabbits, I mean, as a routinized practice, then I think we have a big problem, because then there's no end to what we're capable of doing. Then again, also I think something that we found out doing these interviews, I mean, was that a lot of the people, I mean, the hunters in one city could be killing rooks, like birds, rooks, in hundreds, like every year. So they were shooting birds, but they always came back. And in another city, the hunter said that, why would you shoot rooks? They will always come back. You know, there's no way of like putting an end to rooks. They will always be rooks in cities, so at least in Sweden. So one animal considered a problem in one city was just, they had just given up on this animal in other cities. So one thing, I mean, when I asked these hunters, why couldn't you just stop shooting animals and see what happens? And they were like, no, it will be chaos. I mean, we will go under, it will be, the animals will rule the earth, basically. But at the same time, since some of the animals were, I mean, since the practices were so different between the cities, I can't imagine that it wouldn't be that much of a problem. So, yeah. So that, yeah. And there were so many other good comments. So, do you want to pick one to discuss?
Maybe the issue of keeping the rabbit as a pet and connected to that, separating the rabbit out of the wider ecosystem and choosing it as an analytic category.
Yeah.
Just focusing just on one animal, because I work a lot on plants, and I often feel that qualm about zooming in on a specific plant when plants don't understand themselves as separate from other plants, from fungi, from all these other beings. So it seems to me to be very artificial, and I wonder whether that doesn't twist our analysis if we focus just on one being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in that way maybe the hunters I interviewed were more post-human, because they never focus on just one animal. They even though you can question their methods and their aims maybe also, they still had like a meta perspective, or they tried to keep a more universal perspective on the city and think about like the different kinds of animals living there and the different green areas and how it all hang together basically. Mm-hmm. So they could although I painted a rather horrible picture of these municipal hunters clubbing rabbits to death, some of them also said that, I mean, we often end up protecting animals against humans. So someone might call me and say that, oh, I want you to shoot these deer in my garden because they're eating my plants. And then you have to respond like, oh, but you're living next to big forests, so obviously there will be deer. There's no way for us to extinguish or exterminate all the deer in the forest next to you. So in that way, I mean, yeah, focusing on one animal, I mean, not even hunters do that. They still have a holistic perspective. And I think maybe for this particular piece, like focusing on rabbit is a strategy. I mean, it's more like a strategy showing the reader or listener that, I mean, you think that there is such a thing as a rabbit or one species, that rabbits have a certain status and that you can learn about rabbits and understand what rabbits are. But by showing like these different contexts, I hope to be showing that rabbits are not just one animal. They are different things depending on the context, and they will probably also perceive of their context differently depending on how life is organized around them.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Susanna.
Thanks so much for your presentation. I was picking up, probably continuing the same topic. You decided to bring us this case study of this Julianne Smith, which is very much of a kind of individual project, and you end up saying so. She actually had to put other humans out of the house so that this project would go along. And so you're bringing us the state politics, so biopolitical strategy of the state, and then this very individual point of view. And I wonder if in your project you also look at a kind of a cohabitation. So what Patricia was bringing had to do with this idea of the environment and multi-species kind of approach and assemblages and all that. But I'm also wondering about this idea of cohabitation, humans, non-humans, more humans. So this challenge of, and political challenge of cohabitation. How are you looking at that perspective in this specific research or not? Because now when you were replying, you told us, well, there is the possibility that animals would rule the earth. And I was thinking, well, this is a kind of a fight of who will be ruling the earth, and not who will be able, how will we be able to cohabit, right? So I just would like to listen to you about this issue.
Oh, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you have a good point there. So the people saving the rabbits, so to speak, they are the ones also, I mean, exerting the most power over them in a way, because they do it daily, on a daily basis, meeting the rabbits and just continually affecting them. And since there is no, I mean, and as you say, these projects also take on a sort of an individualistic character, where one individual becomes the savior for the rabbits, and okay, look here, rabbits, I'm saving you here, and I'm creating this for you because I'm so kind, or I'm helping you. So in that way, I mean, the hunters, I mean, most of the hunters I talked to didn't want to exterminate all rabbits. So in a way, they are, again, maybe they have a more holistic perspective on some level, where rabbits are still allowed to thrive in some circumstances without much human intervention. But it's an interesting question. Would there be another way of like saving rabbits without going in and micromanaging their lives and exerting these sort of intimate forms of power on them? I think Tom van Doren, who's also in the advisory board, he has written beautifully about like different projects with animals close to extinction, and how people try to sort of to breed them to make sure that they don't go extinguished, but also but as part of that they also have strategies for like rewilding those creatures. So they have to bring them in and make sure that they procreate, but then they have to also have a strategy of bringing them out again and not making them too dependent on human beings. So there's one chapter in Flightways, maybe, where he writes about cranes, how they like teach cranes to they hatch cranes in a sort of laboratory or a veterinary, some kind of like lab almost, but then they teach the cranes to migrate again, so they can become independent and don't have to rely on humans to take care of them. And maybe that would be also like a way of thinking about like care for rabbits or other wildlife. Maybe there's a way of managing this balance without massive killings and without like forced taming. I talked to one person taking care of a rabbit, like an abandoned rabbit, as part of this network, and he was like an animal activist and a vegan, and he didn't want the rabbit to become attached to him. Maybe that says more about his attachment issues than the rabbit. I'm not sure, but he was like, he built this elaborate like cage outdoors with lots of like tunnels and climbing utensils and things. And he said that like I take care of the rabbits, I bring food for it or him, but I don't want him to be too like close to me because he doesn't like being petted. So he chooses not to. He actually bit me at one point, and I really liked that. Like, he put up a boundary. so they were living in parallel, but they didn't have much contact. So.
Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, David. I have so many. Well, I don't have questions written, but because there's so much intrigue that was prompted by your very insightful talk. And I'm not fond of rabbits, to be honest, but that's perhaps one of the questions I would choose now to ask, because it would be better to discuss that in between today and tomorrow. But one thing is that one practical question that perhaps opens up, I don't know, more insights into this human-rabbit problematic of killing mass in such a mass, because you didn't show basically statistical numbers of what has happened. I imagine if they, I was wondering first, how do the licenses of these municipal hunters in Sweden are managed or administered, in the sense that once I don't know how it is in Sweden with gun ownership, if you have to go through different stages of mental proofs that you are sane enough to handle a gun, being a hunter, which at least from my experience, because I don't live in Portugal, but in Germany it's like that in terms of the hunting licenses. And if this is a different license that it just allows you to hunt urban feral animals, including the rabbits, only them. So these hunters only hunt the rabbits, or they are allowed to hunt all feral lives or all wild species that somehow are too close to becoming a nuisance for human settlements. And if that is connected to also the hunting of bigger predators, that might be actually the solution. I wonder if throughout your interviews and the project that you did, someone also mentioned that perhaps as a better alternative, instead of calling them, bring back the main predators of the rabbits, which I wonder which would be in Sweden, right? So if you could comment on that.
Yeah. So I think it seems you have to have a special license and take some kind of extra course as a municipal hunter, but it's not like a big thing. You have to just be certified. But I think the difficult thing becoming a municipal hunter is to be accepted by other municipal hunters, because those who are already doing it has to sort of take you under their wings. And several of the hunters I interviewed said that we have a problem with people who sort of apply to become a municipal hunter because they think it just gives you a free pass to go around with a gun in the middle of cities and shoot things, and it sounds really exciting, but it's more boring than that. And often you shoot rats and animals that are not associated with power or fame, or so it's not a very prestigious task, and people usually realize that after a while. So it's more like a collegial control, a peer review maybe of hunters that ensures that that you don't get the wrong people in the wrong place. But also once you are a municipal hunter, you also have I mentioned that you have the right to, or you're allowed to shoot from a rolling car, for example. That sounds crazy, but it's something that you can do, and it's also associated with other kinds of special privileges, if you want to call it that. So it's sort of an informal control, and also it's very different between different cities. The statistics that they keep, in some cities the city doesn't care about numbers, and in other cities they have very, very exact, they report the exact numbers of animals that they shot to the city, but I don't know if that makes a difference. So that's also some kind of a measurement of control over hunters. And as you're saying, one possibility would also be to introduce or to allow predators to increase in numbers. And of course foxes would be, they are sort of not controlled very much. But then we also have wolves, and that's a very effective question in Sweden. We have, I think, just around 200 wolves, and there's a constant debate around that, and with people protesting both for the sake of the wolves but also against the wolves, with farmers who want to kill all the wolves, and people get death threats. Politicians receive death threats from hunters who want to get rid of all the wolves. So it's a very effective question. So the bigger the predators get, the more infected the discussion becomes. But we do actually have bears, lots of bears in Sweden, but they are more dangerous than wolves. But there's never a debate around bears for some reason. I'm not sure why.
But these municipal hunters have a territory of operation. I imagine they cannot go into the farms. They can only keep. I turn it off. Okay. Yeah. So these municipal hunters, they will be allowed. They could, if they see a bear. Nowadays we have more sightings of, especially after the pandemics, of this, let's say, bigger mammal hunters themselves, like wolves and bears, that came to cities, close to cities, right, during lockdowns. And I was wondering if they would be allowed to kill all kinds of life that they want, if they see the threat coming, as if it would be a bigger animal as a bear or a wolf.
Yeah,
would they be allowed to do that?
Yeah, but I think for bigger animals they also have to have some kind of, they usually call the police to get a permit, because in Sweden, like formally, I think all the bigger mammals sort of belong to the king. Again, we're this barbaric country up in the north with kings who rule the animals and the humans, and we club rabbits to death. And but basically you're also allowed to do that. But these bigger mammals are often, they are really the purview of the county administrative boards, who are more focused on like wild nature and the management of wild nature. And it's easy, I think, the control of moose, but also predators like bears and wolves. It's much more strict than in cities, because it's easier, in a way, easier to measure the amount of moose or elks in the forest compared to rabbits or rooks or rats in the city, because they move much more and they hide, and the number is bigger and so on.
Thank you. Other questions, comments?
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. More than a question, I had like a very specific curiosity about for a moment you were talking about these encounters between the family rats, the collapse of the building, this rabbit escape, and I think crossing with the wild feral rabbits. And then you talked about the fact that for this reason they weren't, like the had a difficult to kill them. That was more, if I understood well, it was a difficult from them themselves. Like they didn't feel comfortable killing an animal that belonged to someone else in a way.
Yeah. So it's there wasn't like a ban on killing rabbits suddenly, but it was, So yes, and the hunters sort of cooperated also with this rabbit organization to capture rabbits and find them.
And I was wondering if these crossings between different between rabbits of different origins were also generating new debates around this possibility of culling them, the fact that they were mixing with some more rare or valuable I'm sorry, between Portuguese, Italian, and English days. But with animals of the same species, but different, that are valued in different ways, was sharing that debate.
Yeah, absolutely. So this event was, it made big headlines in all the bigger Swedish, newspapers and TV channels, and as I mentioned, it's still talked about. So I think it really raised the debate on the value of rabbits and the status of rabbits and how we think about them, and not only that. I think also some criticism about breeding rabbits for fun. I think that was also a part of the critique. They wasn't the pet rabbits were good and the shooting of the feral rabbits was bad. I think also it sort of highlighted the way we also breed rabbits and under very strict regimes, and that can also, of course, be problematic. And we create different kinds of illnesses and genetic diseases through those practices. But also, the case I began with, the rabbit torture scene, that also raised a lot of debate in Sweden on how we treat rabbits, and that the prison sentences are very short for torturing animals. And just killing an animal without torturing it's hard to give. It's just a crime if the animal belongs to someone, or usually it's a crime because it's very difficult to kill. If the animal is believed to have felt some kind of pain, it's considered as animal abuse. So of course you can't just kill any animal, but still it's hardly a crime in Sweden, and that was also a debate in Sweden at that time. So if someone can just do this to a pet rabbit that they got from a store, maybe we need stricter legislation around that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, David, thank you very much. I'm here more or less like an alien because I am someone that is coming from natural science and modeling, such kind of thing. But in fact, I have my first question is related with the, in fact, with the origin of this problem. In fact, the rabbits are not original from Sweden. So before the beginning of this century, this problem does not exist in Stockholm neither, or in other city in Sweden. So we are talking. In fact, we can see from let's say from the species is like an alien species nowadays in Sweden. Okay. And which means that it's a little bit different in comparison with other problems. For instance, if we look on and we made a comparison with some problems in Portugal with other species. For instance, the javali, the name of the wild, yeah. It is a little different in my opinion, and should be managed maybe in a different way. My question is, did you know that if in Stockholm, in other cities in Sweden, they try in some way to control the reproduction of the species? Because I believe this can be a way to control the spread of the rabbits, trying not to kill them. Let's say. Yeah. Did they try to manage the problem in this way? Do you know?
No, I asked them about that, and so the hunters who I talked to about that, they said that it's difficult to do that because they have such a sensitive metabolism, so it's difficult to medicate them. I mean, like probably they won't eat the medicine because they're careful of what they eat. But if they would, then it's difficult with the dosage and things like that. So I'm not sure if it's true because I only asked them. I mean, as a sociologist, I don't know the biology behind it. But they were saying that it's not practically possible. But it is an interesting thing that that there also seems to be consensus that rabbits should continue to exist in Sweden, although they are quite recently brought to Sweden. Well, there's an older population of rabbits in Gotland, which is like an island where, like with old Viking villages, so the rabbits have been there for a very long time. But otherwise, and also compared to boars, like wild boars is also a problem in Sweden, and there are no organizations protesting against the killing of wild boars, and there are no wild boar shelters, of course. So that's also interesting that different animals gain different kinds of status. And the problem with boars in Sweden is actually that there is no traditional hunting boars. So with moose or with elks, you have these horns on your wall in Sweden to prove that you're a good hunter. But there's no way of, like, there's no honor in killing a boar in Sweden for some reason. So there's no culture around that. So yeah.
Thank you.
Are there questions, comments? Don't be shy.
So I have. What is your take on you mentioned the two things that came to mind on related aspects of or categorizing, basically projecting, instrumentalizing the rabbits from the human perspective as environmental threat. One is that apparently they're tunneling underneath human infrastructures or buildings could potentially create, make the soils or unstable of the foundations of buildings, which I think it's honestly ridiculous. But is that a claim from the interviewees that you had, or it also comes from higher hierarchical positions in the municipalities, perhaps? I mean, who claims that this is something that can be classified as environmental threat? Because I don't think, unless there's a study that backs it up, I don't think it's. And in that sense, with that having mentioned that, kind of loops to or connects to the end of your presentation with the collapse of the building where the red rabbit escaped, right? I mean, it was probably it collapsed because of the snow, not because of, but it somehow, this fear that the system collapsed by such a furry, tiny animal that it's somehow became part of the pet capitalism, makes this environmental threat something that it's actually invisible, you know, like it's made up, or were there studies that prove some family of rabbits that reproduce and live underneath some house, and therefore that collapse. Is there any proof that that's environment, a truly, you know, founded environmental threat?
No, I think, well, in the case of the motorways, when, as I understand it, since I talked to multiple sources, I think that was a real problem with the asphalt, like with cracks in the asphalt and stuff like that. But I never heard of a house falling down because of rabbits. So I think most often it's rather an aesthetic thing that rabbits dig holes in like football fields so you can't play football, or they destroy like beautiful gardens, they gnaw on trees so the trees die. So I think that's it's usually more of an aesthetic reason, although the houses falling down, it's usually an argument brought up because it sounds horrible, so then it's easier maybe to legitimize the killing rabbits.
Creates this anxiety also, no? For the human it could happen.
Yeah. So, but it was something repeated both by hunters and like wildlife managers who had sort of the responsibility to organize the hunting. So it was repeated on both levels. But then again, it's not like they say that, okay, so we found cracks in this building and now we need to go out and shoot rabbits. It's more like a very general argument. One of the hunters I talked to in one of the biggest cities, he was the only one who was employed full time just to take care of animals in the city, and so he had a big responsibility for the biggest area in Sweden actually for a municipal or a wildlife manager. And I asked him, so how do you keep track of which animals to shoot or not to shoot? And he said that, well, you know, I get a hunch. I drive around a lot, and then, you know, I see something, and then I know, well, maybe I should, or then I know that I should, maybe next time I'll bring my gun. And I was like, but you're responsible for this huge, like, metropolitan area. Like, it's so big, you must have some like method of ensuring that you're doing the right thing. But he was like, no, I mean, I know my city, and I can feel if there's something going on. Like, so, yeah.
Veronica, may I? Or does anyone in the audience prefer to? Yeah, may I? Thank you so much, David. It was such a brilliant talk, and I must say that me and Enrique and at least the two of us were here 5 years or 6 years ago when Margot de Mello delivered a talk about rabbits. And I was thinking, like, these years after, how auspicious it is that the same rabbits keep visiting us in our not haunting, but visit. So interesting. And it was so interesting. So I have a couple of comments and a question or two. One was how much this is also context specific, because I was thinking, and those of you that know Portuguese reality as much as I do, or better than I do, can comment on what I will say. For us, it's not so much about rabbits. Here in Lisbon, it's more about pigeons, which both of us also reflected a lot a couple of years ago. So I would say that the equivalent for us would be the pigeons. We don't have this kind of war against the rabbits that you described here. And outside of the urban areas, much of what you said resonated with much of what we've been hearing in Serra da Estrela, where we're doing our field work about, for instance, the boar. There was someone that said that if we don't hunt them, and Filipa here remembers this, we were both there when we did this interview, he said if we don't hunt them, they will soon be in the gardens of the House of the Parliament. That's how we pictured the invasion of the boar. So all the boars will be invading Lisbon, and they will be in the garden, and then they will call us, the hunters, to go there and hunt them. So this to say that, as I see it here, is much of a, it's a different thing among players.
the hunters and their interests, and not as much as what you described, which made me think of how much these are so historic and context specific, and how also evolves around time. So these species have a history in all of these territories they now inhabit, even when, and they also move between, with no boundaries, no administrative boundaries, as you also mentioned, and that is very interesting. Another comment I had was about how you described the alliance between human and rabbits in that case in which the whole house became a rabbit house, and how the alliance with certain species surpasses or goes beyond the alliance with our own species, the humans. And it reminded me of a PhD thesis I discussed a few years ago of a Brazilian student. He did his work with animal activists, both here in Brazil and both in Brazil and here. And of course, one of his results was the burnout of animal activists, but also how this alliance with other species sometimes becomes problematic to the alliance with their own species, the human species, and how this kind of brings their personal life into a collapse. And so this makes me think that this is a powerful and strong argument we can use when we are discussing these animal issues and these animal problems with governance stakeholders, because this really brings to the spotlight how these problematic lives we bring to other species actually falls on our lap, and it becomes our own problem very soon. So I think there's something here I intuitively understand we should and could use as a powerful argument to talk with the stakeholders when it comes to solving these problems of these species in a different way other than culling and other than smashing them. So this was more of a comment. And from here, I would ask two questions and just pick on if it's too late already, or we can just continue the discussion later on. One is about working with other sciences, and in particular specialists in rabbits. For instance, biologists or veterinarians that have an expertise in this kind of species, and how, for instance, I remember for Margot's talk a few years ago, how she mentioned that rabbits do not like being petted, they don't like to being touched. And so when families, for instance, buy a rabbit to offer to the children, and children find them cute and like to pet them because they're so soft, I remember Margot mentioning that they didn't really like it. But today you talked about something which is also very interesting, the tameness of the rabbit, which we also find in regard to other non-domestic species, and how they also learn, and we co-learn together how to be petted and how to pet. And so I wonder if you had this pool of working with other sciences other than our humanities and social sciences points of view, and how that worked for you, because this dialogue is, as we know, a complex one. And also related to this, if you brought all these results to the conversations with the stakeholders, those that are doing the culling, those that want the rabbits to go away, those that are protecting the rabbits. And as we know, this is very tangled and a very conflictual, almost a war zone in terms of discourse, at least. And it's something that we will need to deal with in the project and are already dealing with. So I'm always very curious to know how colleagues are working with this problematic. So thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for great comments. And I think, it would be fantastic to be able to work like you're doing across disciplinary boundaries and thinking about how, so for example, I was thinking about Susanna's comment about also if there would be other ways of creating human-animal or human-rabbit relationships in this case without relying on this sort of savior logic. And maybe that could be an option then, working with biologist or ethologist and thinking about like how we can design cities that are better accommodate both rabbits and humans. So that would be interesting. Erica, who I worked with, I mean, I have a background, I'm interested in veganism and animal philosophy and things like that, so I have that background. And Erica, it comes from like a family of hunters, and she also sometimes do things for like jobs for like the Swedish hunting organization and things like that. So we have very different views, but I think it was interesting to collaborate with her and sort of get the other perspective continuously and try to challenge myself also about like how to create sustainable cities. So that would be sort of a collaboration, but then there were situations where that became problematic because at some point we were invited to this sort of lobbying committee or lobbying organization that wanted to relieve, make it easier to get a gun in Sweden and make it easier to hunt. So I was like, no, I'm against this. I won't do this. And she was like, yeah, I think I might go. So we had conflicts like that, but it's still, I mean, we could still write our separate papers and give each other inputs. So yeah, it was sort of interdisciplinary, although we were both social scientists.
I think we're on schedule, so we have time for one last question. If anyone, yeah, lady there.
Thank you, David, for this fascinating talk. Okay. I just have more of a curiosity, because I work with the art deer in the UK, and the question of mobility and subversive biopolitics. And in some cases, it was in a rural area, in a forest, so it was a different context. But some of the forest managers told me that in some, so when it was the hunting, when they were being culled, they knew, so they would approach the gardens of they would approach the gardens of people where they wouldn't shoot because it's close to the houses. And here, it was a bit not shocking, but to see a hunter, like a gun near the houses, and there were it was a pigeon. But my question is whether these different status that the rabbits have, in one place they are killable, and then the others they aren't, right? As far as I could understand, whether they have their own strategies to run away from the places where they can be killed or not. Just a curiosity.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think with birds, they talk much more about birds being smart and being able to sort of learn where to nest and where not to nest. So if you shoot birds on a beach, it can be enough to shoot a few, and then they won't return in a year back to the beach, according to this hunter I talked to. But I think maybe to some extent there were, well, in one city they had the problem that, like in the center, there were lots of different patches of land where some private owned and some owned by the city, and there the problem was that the private landowners didn't care about killing the rabbits. So the municipal hunters had issues with rabbits running into the safe grounds, so they couldn't like keep the rabbit population down because of that. So they didn't talk about the rabbits as sort of like smart or what do you call it? Like they didn't talk about the rabbits as conspiring or anything, but it was more of a nuisance for them that the rabbits like kept running away and hiding in these places. So actually, yeah, that's something I should think more about, because they often talked about birds as conspiring and really smart, but not the rabbits for some reason. So I have to think about that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions or comments? We have about 9 minutes, so one final one.
much for your really interesting talk. And being from Finland, it made me reflect on the similar issue in Helsinki with the culling of the city bunnies or city rabbits. And they don't shoot them in Helsinki, but they use cages to trap them and archery, so bows. And I wanted to ask, what do they do with the dead rabbits in Stockholm? Because in Finland, one of the discourses in media around normalizing the culling of these rabbits was to also eat them. So some news outlets would publish recipes for these like local sustainable food sources, being the rabbits. And I was wondering, is it similar in Stockholm or in Sweden that they or some people would eat the rabbits too?
No, actually not. But yeah, that could be one solution. But rabbits. I mentioned quickly that rabbits are sometimes burned in power plants. So that is a use for rabbits. But there was, I don't think it was rabbits. Maybe it was pigeons. Or it was in Malmö in Sweden. They had a program where they shot birds and then they made like a stew, and gave to homeless people. And well, yeah, we could go on discussing that for a while, though, all the problematic stuff involved in that. But I mean, they were stopped from doing it by the city because it was because of health reasons, or at least alleged health reasons. And he was very disappointed, like, oh, all these animals die in vain, and we had this thing going, and now it's closed down. So yeah, there is this problem with like animals that are also considered pests. There's like this purity and dirtiness thing around them, the Mary Douglas logic with purity and danger and so on, which makes it difficult, I think. I mentioned Gotland quickly, and that there is a tradition there of eating rabbits, of eating rabbit meat, but you're not normally served rabbit in other places in Sweden, so maybe that it will work there. But actually, there were several hunters talking about like eating animals that were killed, that they had killed. That there's like technically you're not allowed to bring home a moose to eat it yourself if you shoot a moose as a municipal hunter. So you have to sort of do it secretly. So one of the hunters I talked to had a headless moose hanging in his garage, waiting to be cut up. So that moose was roadkill, and he said that most people think it's disgusting, but I think like why not? It's dead. It's better than eating like factory meat. So yeah, maybe there's a taboo there that could be worked with.
Well, I think we just have to thank you, David, for your patience with all the questions and for a wonderful talk. Thank you so much for everything.